Do you see the increase of Congress' role in U.S. foreign policy, and what are the possible consequences of that?
I really do see an increased role of the Congress in foreign policy under this president. I think you're going to see both Democrats and Republicans wanting to put certain limits on the president's freedom of action areas that we have grave concerns, and probably the foremost is Russia. For example, I'm a co-sponsor of legislation, bipartisan in the House, that Senator McCain has introduced in the Senate. That would limit the president's ability to remove the sanctions on Russia. Many of us are deeply skeptical of Putin's intentions, the invasion of Ukraine, what Putin and the Russians are doing to interfere with our elections here and in Europe. And so you're seeing the Congress really act aggressively, I think, in a bipartisan way on issues like that. Also on the issues of human rights. Many of us have a deep concern with the crackdown in Turkey and the crackdown in Azerbaijan and other places. Human rights don't really seem to be on the priority list for the administration, and so I think you're going to see Congress step up and raise this as an issue.
How can the U.S. foreign policy towards Armenia and the region in general change?
Well, it's a very good question. I think a lot remains to be seen, what approach this president will take towards Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan. I think there will be strong bipartisan support in the Congress for a stronger relationship with Armenia, for the ability of people in Artsakh to have self-determination. I am concerned with the administration in that we know the president's family has property and licensing agreements in Turkey. We know they've had business interests in Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, the family did not divest completely from their business interests, and so this is kind of a cloud that hangs over this region. Will the president be acting in the best interests of the country, or will he be acting out of an economic interest driven by his investments? To give you an illustration, less than a year ago during the campaign, when the president first announced he wanted a ban on Muslims, Erdogan threatened to take the Trump name off Trump buildings in Turkey. When the president later seemed to back away from that and actually praised Erdogan, then there was no more discussion of removing the name from the buildings. Similarly, just within the last week, we had a situation with China where originally the president had called into question whether we would continue to have the one China policy. And the Trump family had been appealing for a copyright or trademark on the Trump name in China. That had not been granted. Then the Trump administration said, okay, we will continue the one China policy, and their copyright or trademark was approved in China. So what is driving this? Unfortunately, we shouldn't have to ask these questions. Ethics experts, both Democrats and Republicans, have said the family really needs to divest so that we know decisions they make on Turkey, on Armenia, on Azerbaijan are based on the merits and not economic interest.
Congressman, what do you think? Will Washington continue its efforts to help Armenia be more independent and get rid as much as possible from Russia's economic pressure?
I think there's very strong bipartisan support in Congress for a bigger, stronger, better economic relationship with Armenia, with helping both Armenia and Artsakh develop their economies more, increase trade, get rid of some of the double taxation problems. So there's very strong bipartisan support for that, and in the Armenian caucus we're working on those issues. This is, again, one area where I think you can expect the Congress to take the lead. I would hope that we would also be able to persuade the administration to abandon, frankly, the policy in the Obama administration of viewing the situation in Artsakh and with respect to Azerbaijan with a view of kind of a moral equivalence, calling on both sides to refrain from violence when Azerbaijan has been the aggressor. I'd love to see us also on a bipartisan basis continue in Congress to call for ceasefire monitoring equipment along the line of contact. That's still a very precarious situation that could erupt into warfare at any time. So I think you will see a continued effort along these lines.
Congressman, let's speak about the immigration reforms. Everyone is talking about it right now in the United States. What was your view of the President Trump's executive order on immigration? How will this order affect Armenians? What do you think?
Well, it will have an effect on Armenians, and we've gotten certainly a lot of calls in my office expressing concern from a lot of people, but including the Armenian community. We have for many, many years now worked with the highest program to help Armenians from Iran come to the United States. That's very much been put in question because Iran is, of course, one of the 7 countries that would be banned and the visas would not be allowed to go forward. But similarly, Armenians in Syria or Armenians in Iraq that are trying to be reunited with family here, or some of which have already resettled in Armenia and are trying to come here to join their families here, that also could be put in doubt or questioned by this ban. Now, the ban has been essentially stayed by the courts, but the administration has said they're going to release a new ban that seeks to deal with the court objections to the old ban, but it's going to endeavor to do so by, I think, making some superficial changes and still focusing on those 7 countries. At least that's what the administration has said. If that's true, it may very well be a problem. But we're going to continue to do all we can for people in the Armenian community and people in other communities who are trying to flee harm's way, trying to come here to be with family. This is part of the age-old historic tradition of the United States, and I want to make sure that that humanitarian mission isn't left behind.
Thank you, Congressman. Last year we saw an active war in Karabakh. What can Washington do to help parties reach a peace agreement? And what is your position regarding the current situation in Karabakh?
This is, I think, one of those parts of the world that probably most Americans don't know about that could instantly come to their attention in the form of a major regional war. So I worry about this a great deal. The domestic unrest in Azerbaijan, the declining oil prices putting budgetary pressure on Azerbaijan. You know, they have reacted in the past to these kind of pressures by provoking conflict with Artsakh and Armenia as a way of ginning up a rally around the flag kind of spirit in Azerbaijan. They've also put a lot of money in their military, and I think there's a risk of a disparity in the resources going to the Armenian military and the Azerbaijan military, as well as the military in Artsakh. So I'm gravely concerned about it. I think we need to continue the pressure in Congress on the administration to call out Azerbaijan when they violate the peace, to insist on the introduction of ceasefire monitoring equipment, to make sure that the new administration doesn't repeat the mistakes of the old by calling on both sides equally when one side is the aggressor. Because I think the effect that had was it was green-lighting Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan was walking away thinking, well, if the worst that's going to happen is the American ambassador to Minsk or the American ambassador to Armenia merely calls on both sides to refrain from violence, then we might as well continue doing it. We won't take any greater responsibility than the other side. So I think Congress has a very important role to play in championing those issues, but also keeping pressure on the administration.
Thank you very much, Congressman. About 2 years ago, on April 24th, Armenians worldwide were following your outstanding initiative to read the names of Armenian genocide victims in Congress. What do you think will be the new administration's approach to this issue? What can be done for Armenian and Turkish nations' reconciliation?
Well, on the genocide issue, I think on the positive side, Mike Flynn is no longer in the administration because Flynn had an economic relationship that we know about with Turkey, his consulting firm. Flynn also wrote an op-ed right around the time of the election, basically extolling the merits of Erdogan and calling for the cleric Gulen, Fethullah Gulen, to be sent back to Turkey without ever seeing the evidence of whether Gulen had anything whatsoever to do with the coup. Erdogan is, of course, using the coup to crack down on all of his opposition, whether they were involved with the coup or not. So Flynn was very worrying in terms of his views and his ties and his economic interests in Turkey. Nonetheless, on the other side of the ledger, Trump has his own economic interests in Turkey, and that concerns me in terms of how he will view the genocide, because this is really the best opportunity in the last 8 years to get a new president that has not said anything on this issue, that is essentially a tabula rasa, a blank slate, to do the right thing. And you know, one of the things about the president is he's not shy about breaking with precedent, and maybe this will be one of the good areas where he breaks with precedent and he'll recognize the genocide. What I've been urging is that, you know, influential members of the diaspora that have a relationship with this new president, now's the time to reach out to the president, to educate him on the genocide, to encourage him to say and do the right thing. I I have to say I have a healthy skepticism about it. I worry about the economic interests the president has, but also I worry about how praiseworthy he thinks Erdogan is. In much the same way the president has been praising Putin, he's been praising Erdogan. He seems to like the strong man kind of a mold. And so we have an opportunity here to try to impress upon the new president the imperative of making the right decision on this.
What are the chances to pass the new resolution?
Well, this is the other thing. We're working on a bipartisan letter to the president to urge the president to recognize the genocide. At the same time, we are going to be introducing soon the new genocide resolution. And again, we have a new Congress, new opportunity. The Speaker, you know, back in the day before he was a Speaker, was supportive of the resolution. But since he has been Speaker, he has not allowed it to come up for a vote. We need to continue putting pressure on the Speaker as well as on the Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Ed Royce, to bring it up, to allow a vote, to take this to the floor. And that's something that, again, doesn't separate people on party lines, but that we need to continue to make the case for.